Ladies and gentlemen, we need to talk about the Epstein Files, because apparently we cannot go a single day this year without a historical event taking place. And I'm saying historical because it is affecting the whole wide world. Well, let's say mostly everybody outside of America, because with the exception of Ghislaine Maxwell, who is currently enjoying a wonderful prison sentence in better condition than she was before she actually got jailed, it seems that only figures outside of the United States have suffered consequences from actually being in the Epstein Files. Because people, I've tried skimming through these things, letting them marinate, because reading through just a few pages out of 3 freaking million, which is only just the first batch out of the things that were allowed to be released, almost made me crash the fuck out. Because how do we even sort through this? When the Department of Justice of a country is exposing victims, protecting the perpetrators, including the president, which I refuse to add some ambiguity in there because the man is guilty AF, and the department is still failing to meet its legal obligation to release all of the Epstein files, because there is more. The DOJ is currently going with the excuse of, hey, we were forced to release this through the Epstein Transparency Act, for which of course we sloppily redact this stuff, which was the very excuse that we were going with for the hold-up, but hey, the files are out. So there's no need for an investigation. We don't need to persecute anybody, and we certainly are not going to be using the excuse of, hey, it's just the leftist, it's a democratic hoax. Because you know that they won't do that. The administration could be using that as an excuse, but they won't, because no matter what they do, it will expose them too. For mind you, this stuff is so insane that I had myself prepared for the wildest stuff, to read the craziest thing ever. I was prepared to see individuals of all sizes, of all walks of life, the scientists, the philanthropists, the Elon Musks. that one is funny. And the many PDF files that will be involved there. Given the nature that's been fostered around these things, and that tips were sent their way because there are emails that are like correspondence between Epstein and his co-conspirators, and then tips that were sent the way of the FBI and other investigators, then the FBI then collected. When they read like this, something is very concerning here. And it's just not the email in question that was sent, because listen to the following. I'd like to add a few points disclosed by the purported victim. While on this yacht, he witnessed African-American males having sex with white blonde female, all of whom were bleeding during intercourse. He was a victim of a type of ritualistic sacrifice in which his feet were caught with a scimitar, but left no scarring.
What the is this?
On the yacht, he witnessed babies being their intestines removed, and individuals eating the from the intestines. He was also by George Bush I. Victim disclosed he was escorted to the FBI building by Michael Moore, who is the creator of True Pundit, described by multiple online sources as a conspiracy-driven news website that attempts to paint the FBI in a bad light. Moore has a criminal record as a result of an FBI investigation, copyright infringement. Let me know if you want to discuss the former FBI agent that called this into the head office. Now, that is definitely something. It's a tip. We can't confirm any of this actually took place. But when the response is, I didn't realize that Bush him too. Okay, you're left wondering, like, what is real here? That is my main issue with this recent release of Epstein Files, because they have done such a shady job doing either the reduction and the way in which they've been released, which they did from the start, let's be honest here. But if it wasn't for the rampant incompetence, I would almost say that it is intentionally done so to, like, spread the seeds of doubts in people who are not going to believe some of the stuff that are written in here. For that very reason, I thought that I solicited the videos of a person that usually does a great job compiling the evidence on the Epstein Files and share it with you. So naturally, I would add some of the stuff that I myself have taken notes of in the past because I've made videos on the subject matter. So let's check out Coffezilla, who just a couple of weeks ago was telling us how they literally are covering the Epstein Files. But hey, here it is. Wow. Let's talk about the cult.
The FBI just dropped 3.5 million files, and it is incredible. Huge bombshells about some of the most powerful people on the planet. I can't believe they let some of this stuff out. I mean, it is stunning. Honestly, one of the biggest lies we've seen is the idea that the FBI could possibly come to us and say, not only is there not a client list, there was no credible evidence that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals. Guys, we're about to see planned blackmail to one of the most powerful people on the planet, and that is Bill Gates. Listen, there's a lot we're gonna get to, but we have to start with probably the craziest revelation here, which
William, yes, talks about Williams happened for years now. Everybody knew that he still had a relationship with Epstein post the 2008 jailing of Jeffrey Epstein, and he continued to have both donations to MIT, wherein the funniest thing happened. The literal president at MIT at the time was like, hey, this was not just philanthropic donations, these were done on behalf of Bill Gates, but through Jeffrey Epstein.
This is Jeffrey Epstein emailing himself about Bill Gates. Now, if you don't know, Bill Gates and Epstein had a relationship post 2008. That's a big year. You're gonna hear a lot today, because 2008 was the time that Epstein pled guilty for soliciting of somebody under the age of 18. He was a predator at this point. Everybody knew it. Now, eventually, Bill Gates would get divorced when all of this came out. Melinda Gates said it was part of the direct cause for the divorce. She said she met Epstein and said he was evil.
He was evil personified.
So you have to understand, this is like Bill Gates' kryptonite. He's one of the richest men on the planet. He's got this huge philanthropy arm. But this relationship with Epstein has been a huge problem for him. And Epstein appears to have known that, because in 2013, Bill Gates appears to be distancing himself from Jeffrey Epstein, and Epstein seems to have a problem with that.
Well, distancing is one hell of a word to say. How many bloody sources were there that found him actually taking trips to his New York apartment wherein he would spend the night discussing with the man? He who claimed that, oh, you know, Jeffrey Epstein's lifestyle isn't quite mine. Of course, this was rationalized as him talking about the decor, but, you know, in that very mansion, there is a picture of Jeffrey Epstein in jail. Like, bruv, is this what you're saying about a registered sex offender? One that pled guilty to soliciting, you know, from minors? Yes, distancing yourself. That's the weird thing about Bill Gates whenever he made these stories. And these are stories, because he will tell something, investigators will investigate, and they will find out that he was just selling a lot of crap.
He says, I assume the dedication to our relation went both ways. Larry has now asked me to recommit to a confidentiality agreement. Basically, he's got to shut up about his relationship with Bill Gates. And this is where the blackmail starts, and it comes in the form of like, if I were you, I would do X if I were the type of guy that you should be. He says, in that regard, I suggest I buy you the house that you had your heart set on. In addition to 5 years of severance, we'll buy you out of the investment contract we agreed upon, 30 to 40% of an $100 million partnership for $30 million in today's terms. That's what I would have done had I been in your shoes. Then he lays out what he has on Bill Gates, or what he says he has. Quote, to add insult to injury, you subsequently, with tears in your eyes, implore me to delete the emails I had regarding your STD. Your request that I provide you antibiotics that you could surreptitiously give to Melinda, and the description of your I mean, this is insane. I mean, it's completely insane. It's like basically laying out in text form, I would give me millions of dollars, and I can't believe you're asking me to delete the message where you were going to give STD medication to your wife.
Which is very weird to hear, because the person who literally kickstarted the Gates Foundation that deal with not just global warming but also a lot about medication to impoverished countries would not know how to handle STD How the f that makes sense? Like, I'm genuinely asking.
Without her knowledge. I mean, it's complete. It's crazy. It's just completely obvious what he's doing here. It's just a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Here's what you should do. But now that coming out after Epstein's death, this looks really bad for Gates, obviously, because You usually wouldn't blackmail somebody for something that's completely false or fake. I mean, maybe he did that. But we also know Bill Gates had affairs. Obviously, Melinda credits it for their divorce. So it's hard to believe there was nothing sketchy going on. Bill Gates, of course, maintains that it was completely above board. He says the fact this allegation was in here just shows how much Epstein was willing to defame people. But Epstein lays it out. He says he helped Bill get drugs in order to deal with the consequences of sex with Russian girls, facilitating his illicit trysts with married women, and to being asked to provide Adderall for bridge tournaments. Look, guys, this is exactly what we suspected the whole time. Epstein was providing services to rich people and expecting payment via blackmail. Now you might say, and it's true, that we don't know that Epstein ultimately sent that version of an email to Gates. All we know is he sent that to himself. He may have planned the blackmail and just been drafting something. But what we do know are two things. The Wall Street Journal has reported that Gates was threatened by Epstein over an affair. We also know that after this blackmail email Jeffrey sent to himself was written, eventually Gates sent a $2 million donation to MIT directed by Jeffrey Epstein, which is a bit weird if you had distanced yourself from the guy and y'all had this big falling out.
Well, that was always part of Epstein's play, to buy legitimacy in any way whatsoever. And what is more legitimate to be the philanthropist who sends money on behalf of Bill Gates? Because I think that people need to remember this. Epstein was not some kind of a genius. He was a scammer. He started all the way back in '76, right? Epstein, with his math degree that he never got hired by Bear Stearns because he fit the profile of a PhD. Poor, smart, and with a deep desire to be rich. That was the profile they went with. So he rose quickly through the connection that he could create, because that was just how you'd made deals back then in the day, right? If you knew that somebody's CEO was going to be somewhere in New York and you could create connections with some other celebrity or whatever, that could actually help a firm. That was the kind of deal that Jeffrey Epstein was good at and what he continued to do through his entire scamming career. And with him working at Bear Stearns for some time came social protection, because he was dating the chairman's daughter, so the firm was not going to do anything to him. And later on, of course, he got involved in the Tower Ponzi scheme with Stephen Hoffenberger that used to we talked about that in the previous video, who later claimed that Epstein helped orchestrate the, 500 million Ponzi scheme. While Hoffenberg, of course, went to jail, Epstein remained free, which bought Epstein some legitimacy again because he was free. But after leaving Wall Street, he posed as a bounty hunter for lost assets. And in one instance, he convinced investors to put $450 million into crude oil deal. Oil, which of course Epstein kind of made vanish and never paid them back. And in '88, he executed a pub and dub scheme, which was his usual strategy, with a company called Penwall. He drove up the stock prices and took over the bid, sold for a profit, and then refused to return the capital to the friends whom had lended him the funds in the first place. Again, same tactic as always. Then, of course, you have Leslie Wexner, whom is like, if you read through the Epstein Files, he's a recurring character here. Of course, he got the power of attorney over Wexner's wealth. Leslie Wexner, who, by the way, Victoria's Secret, Bath and Body Works, all of those brands that have to deal with women. Wonder where that goes. But Epstein gets total power of attorney over his fortune. Wexner later claimed that Epstein misappropriated some of the funds because, Epstein was buying mansions and planes with the money that he got. And of course, built some legitimacy through that. And of course, all the while, Leslie Wexner was being told by his own folks that, hey, you should not deal with this man. He's a fucking predator who has been assaulting women at your house. Wexner was like, nah, he's my best friend. But with Wexner's wealth, he got through the prestigious boards of the Rockefeller University and started getting into political circles. That's just how it happened. And then, of course, if you are going to have faith in, I don't even know if you can even say that, the person who helped OJ and Bill Cosby.
It's a very simple case. He never should have been prosecuted in the first place.
If you want to argue that he was manipulated, I will not. But he got the likes of Alan Dershowitz and other political, judicial minds to vouch for him. And got into some hedge funds where Epstein pressured the fund managers to reimburse him some money after threatening to pull Wexner's wealth out of the funds. So at the end of the day, all that he did was to make sure that people always owed him favors, and he did that through blackmail, through either sheer embarrassment, or with the connections to the people that had connections to people that he knew. He was like a higher echelon Diddy, except that his parties had less to do with baby oil, but actual babies. God damn, that I feel gross saying that. But that was like the conclusion that it was leading to.
Now again, do we know for sure that Bill Gates did all of that? No, of course we don't. But do I think Bill Gates was innocently looking for charity advice from a after he already pled guilty? No. I don't. I'm sorry, I'm not that gullible. And speaking of not that gullible, we've been lied to also by another richest guy on the planet. Jesus.
Before we dive further there, there's a thing that very much sucks about Bill Gates' case, because this man really is not good at lying. Because if you're innocent and you get interviewed by PBS, who's going to be talking about the stuff that you've done and asking you such things as,
what did you do when you found out about his background?
Well, and, I've said I regretted having those dinners, and there's absolutely nothing new on that.
Is there a lesson for you, for anyone else looking at this?
And you give the answer.
Well, he's dead, so.
What? He continues by saying that there's nothing more to it. You can go and check it out yourself. The dude, oh my God. It's like, if you're innocent, how the fuck are you going to be answering like that? You idiot. But of course, he's not. He's guilty in one way or another, but we are likely not going to know for sure.
It's a shock why they don't want to put this out.
Now, of course,
Musk,
with Elon,
who has been saying for years that it is a lie that he went to Epstein's island. In fact, he says he refused to go. From Elon, he says, Epstein tried to get me to go to his island. I refused. He says, anyone pushing this false narrative deserves complete contempt. Later responding to another headline which said Elon Musk planned trip to Epstein's private island, and he says, this is false. But of course, we start to dig through the files, and we can see on Epstein's calendar that Elon Musk is booked December 6th of 2014. But maybe you don't believe that. That's just the word of Jeffrey Epstein. But maybe you'll believe the word of Elon Musk, who was caught emailing Jeffrey Epstein to go to his island post the guilty plea. Elon Musk writes, "Will be in BVI St. Bart's area over the holidays. Good time to visit." Jeffrey Epstein says, "I will send a heli for you." Later, Elon Musk writes to Epstein, probably just to Lula and me, his ex-wife, what day and night would be the wildest party on your island? The world's richest man is asking the most pedophile man for the wildest party on his island. And then it gets more explicit. In 2012, remember, this is the guy who said, I refused it. I could never do that, right?
Listen. I know a lot of this is grim. And I wish that the whole wide of the world and the administration as well could take it as seriously and give respect and rigor to an investigation on this matter. But because of the ridiculousness of it all, the only way through which we can even get through any of this is by somehow finding humorous angles here. Because what in the actual... He actually begged him. He begged him.
In 2012, he says, do you have any parties planned? I've been working to the edge of my sanity this year. I really want to hit the party scene in St. Bart's or elsewhere and let loose. The invitation is much appreciated, but a peaceful island experience is the opposite of what I'm looking for. Guys, he can't even play the I went to go study math excuse, which is what all these guys do. They say, hey, I I just went to go talk to scientists.
Oh, speaking of scientists, actually, in the latest files, we have the featurette of individuals such as Lawrence Krauss and guess whom? One of the, at least many of the members of the anti-woke crowd, like the biggest consumer of mold, J.K. Rowling, and that guy who once led the new atheist movement, but somehow became a massive Islamophobe while still claiming that Christianity is actually the right way despite being an actual atheist, and started being very weird about trans people and women as well. Richard fucking Dawkins. This is the part where I have to stop myself and elaborate because somebody is going to write a comment like that anyways, but being an atheist does not tell you anything about a person's character. There are good and bad atheists out there, just like there are some God-fearing Christians who are best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. It is just about the proposition of not believing in God. But in the case of Dawkins himself, who apparently is considering himself as a technical Christian, this is specifically about a man and his friend Lawrence Krauss. Because if you, like me, went through the construction journey, you would have come across the likes of Richard Dawkins, and you would have come to learn that despite him somewhat have been a pretty cool guy at some point, just went through a weird route of misogyny, of hatred, of Islamophobia, where he completely fucking lost it and started attacking anybody who refused to give him his fucking honey at the airport. He became literally like Jordan Peterson, equally unsufferable but less cryptic in his language. Like, if you ask him about the Epstein file, he won't be telling you that, what is a file? What does the name Epstein actually mean? But Richard Dawkins, who is a man that had a pattern of dating women that were at least 20 to 40 years younger than him, was of course friends with Jeffrey Epstein, but mainly through the connection that he had with Lawrence Krauss. Additional information here in the editing, I forgot to mention that the gentleman, or should I even call these people gentlemen anymore, in the far left of this picture, a John Brockman, used to be a literary agent that was bankrolled by Jeffrey Epstein and thus became the glue between a lot of these writers. Lawrence Krauss, a huge proponent of Jeffrey Epstein, the man who once stated that, as a scientist, I don't believe that Jeffrey Epstein could do anything of the sort. What the fuck? Richard Dawkins, I know that I'm kind of jungling to some of the characters here, so I'm going to be putting images on screen, has become such a flaming racist and misogynist that he was attacking his critics, namely a content creator on this platform that I actually enjoy quite a lot because he's a good science communicator, a Rebecca Watson.
Pointing out that even if Epstein did rape those kids, Krauss knows for a fact he came out of prison a more thoughtful and responsible man who was intent on doing good. And that, I swear to God, he said this, if the famous physicist Richard Feynman were still alive today, he would also agree with Lawrence Krauss. Fucking yikes.
Who had this kind of like a blog in like the early 2010s where she would participate in like atheist debates and propagation of rational thinking. But as soon as she started criticizing some of the rhetoric that they had, especially within the atheist circles and how they were treating women, because a lot of new atheists were very misogynistic, she was being called what was it? Like some fucking weird slur to denote a Islamic woman. Additional edit, yes, I know, another one, but sometimes it pays off to take some time off before you actually edit your footage, because when you do that, you end up finding out that Rebecca Watson actually did a recent video on the Epstein Files, wherein she included a clip like the following.
And a few days later, on July 2nd, Dawkins posted a comment on PZ Meyer's blog mocking me for complaining about the treatment I get, comparing me to a fictional Muslima who isn't allowed to drive and gets beaten by her husband. Wow, misogynistic and racist, who would have thought?
I highly recommend that you go and check the rest of the video yourself. Link in the description below. Like, she put out a video like almost a month ago discussing this after the previous batch of Epstein Files were released, where she was vindicated like almost 15 years later, as everybody got to find out that the people who are kickstarting this culture war were in the Epstein Files. But Lawrence Lawrence Krauss, best friend with Richard Dawkins, was acting like a middleman between Epstein and the other scientists. So Krauss will have the connections with some of the scientific community, and Epstein was requesting him to kind of gather some of them to come to his island. And the thing here is that Epstein, much like how Coffezilla is likely going to be explaining here about Musk, absolutely hated his guts because he became unsufferable. Because Lawrence Krauss could not manage to gather the people that Epstein wanted to come to his island, but came with like filler characters that he wanted to add to the parties, and Epstein was like, stop fucking around. But the reason as to why I'm pointing this out is that there were people who were so desperate to get in the good graces of a literal pedophile because of his connections, that they desperately wanted to just get along with him. And the same thing happens here with Musk.
Elon's like, hey, I don't want to do that. I'm looking for a party. That's what I'm here to do. And then Jeffrey Epstein writes, understood, I will see you on St. Barth. The ratio on my island might make your ex-wife uncomfortable. I can't believe these guys are lying to us, and people are swallowing it still, thinking that Elon Musk had nothing to do with this guy. So again, that's 2012. That's 2014. But guess what? There's another time in 2013. I mean, this seems like a yearly thing with the boys. Here, once again, Elon Musk writes, we'll be in the BVI St. Bart's area over the holidays. Again, is there a good time to visit? Jeffrey Epstein, any day, 1st to the 8th, play it by ear if you want, always space for you. They then plan some more, and you might think, well, if Elon ever told the truth, this is when he has to reject, right? Because he said, I refused. But actually, it appears to be one of those cases where, like, your friend says, like, oh, bro, I dumped her. And actually, it was the other way. Yeah, it turns out Elon didn't dump the dumped Elon. He says, bad news. Unfortunately, my schedule will keep me in New York. Hopefully, we can schedule another time in the future. Jeffrey Epstein let Elon down. That's actually the real story. Is the reason he didn't go in 2013 was because he couldn't go. Jeffrey Epstein was not there. Guys,
Jesus Christ.
I mean, how blatant do they have to make it before we start to just see through it, right? When they issue these ridiculous denials, they're totally associated with the guy after the guilty plea. They lie through their teeth, but they can't even keep their story straight. I mean, that's what's crazy. They're not even competent at this. They get caught in their own lies all the time. Remember, the FBI's official story was they didn't blackmail. Well, before
no
we
blackmail
even
at
had
all.
these files,
No conspirators.
Howard Lutnick was on the record calling Jeffrey Epstein the greatest blackmailer ever.
So how come Bill Gates and all these
him.
other people could hang around him and not see what you saw? Or did they see it and ignore it? Or
No, they participated.
right.
That's what his MO was, you know, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume was on video.
Howard Lutnick, who's the same guy who's always in the background with Trump, laughing like a fucking idiot. If there's one thing to give this man, he has a great smile. Everything else is bloody gross.
This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever.
Interesting. Okay, so Howard has a different perspective. Now, if you don't know, that guy, do you think he's just telling the truth there? Even this guy who's contradicting
Epstein's
the official
neighbor.
narrative, this guy literally lived next to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes.
This guy was like, I'm going to tell the truth. Those guys participated. That guy lives next to Jeffrey Epstein. And by the way, he lied too. I love this video we're about to get into because this guy, Mr. He's the greatest blackmailer ever, does he know something we don't know? Because it's interesting, Mr. I'm his neighbor had to also explain how he had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. And he lays it out pretty simply. He goes, yep, I lived next to him, but in 2005, I had such a horrible experience that I knew I could never talk to him again.
He was your neighbor for 10 years. How well did you know him?
We move in 2005, okay? Jeffrey Epstein is arrested in like 08, I think, or something like that.
Right.
So knock on the door. His assistant on like a Saturday says, Mr. Epstein, your neighbor would like to invite you over for coffee. And there's a massage table in the middle of the room. Massage table in the middle of your house? How often do you have a massage? And he says, every day. And then he like gets like weirdly close to me.
Ooh.
And he says, and the right kind of massage.
Ooh.
Now my wife.
First and foremost, I like the setup here that we have from multiple angles. But at the same time, ma'am, can you please stop making those sounds? Ooh, oh, Jesus Christ, Epstein.
Is standing here. So she looks at me and I look at her and we say, I'm sorry, we have to go. And we left.
Absolute
And in the 6 or 8 steps
nonsense
it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again.
Well, he couldn't be more clear, could he, right? He says, hey, I may have been his next door neighbor, but I met him once before the 2008 guilty plea. Remember I said that was a big deal? And we got invited over, and it was like 5 seconds, and we left, and we realized he was a creep. We were out of there. He made this rude, lewd comment in front of my wife. I would never go see this guy. I mean, he makes it super clear he's gross.
So I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
These other guys, they may have participated.
They participated.
But Howard Lutnick, he could never. No. He's too good of a guy. Well, guess what we found in the old emails? Looky. It's Howard Lutnick writing in to Jeffy Boy in 2012. Hi, Jeff. We're landing in St. Thomas early afternoon, planning to head over. Where are you located? What's the exact location for my captain? Does Sunday evening for dinner sound good?
The nastiest part of this is always taking part in the Virgin Islands. And number 2, dude invited the whole family post 2008. 2012, inviting your whole damn family and adjuncts for a dinner at a registered sex offenders. No. Goddamn thing making me exchange language here. We done met.
Good? Is this the guy you said made a lewd comment to your wife and, I could never be in front of him? He's gross. Guess what the next email is? My boy's wife messaging in saying we're headed towards you in St. Thomas. Later, the subject line, Jeffrey Epstein. Good morning, Howard. No. Jeffrey wished me to pass you along. Nice seeing you. They clearly met, and the guy is just lying about it to your face, to the American public's face, and they tried to hide it from us. I can't...
Inviting all of the generations along. Good grief.
Not emphasize this enough. They're lying through their teeth. You think this guy perfectly remembers a 2005, like walking in the guy's house? I remember exactly what I said to him. My wife and I looked at each other, and he wouldn't remember the 2012. I boated over to his private island for a dinner. Is that what we're really thinking? Is that what we're expected to believe? This is a momentary lapse in his judgment. No, these guys don't even care about being consistent. And they're all throwing each other under the bus. Don't you remember Elon Musk saying, the time to drop the really big bomb, Donald Trump is in the Epstein Files. That's the real reason they haven't been made public. My guy, you begged to get in there. In the Epstein Files, very clearly doing stuff you lied about, okay? So is Howard Lutnick, who says, yeah, Bill Gates, he's probably getting blackmailed because he participated. What did you do on the island over in 2012, Howard?
You didn't even get blackmailed. You invited the whole family. He doesn't even have the excuse of, oh no, he has something on me. Dude went there willingly.
I mean, does anyone care? Now, the last thing I want to talk about is some of the most explosive stuff. It's also, again, I have to say, unverified, okay? This is the NTOC, the FBI's National Threat Operations Center. And the challenge with confirming some of this is that these are anonymous tips, or they black them out at least, so we don't know who they are, and anyone can drop a tip. Now, that doesn't mean that you should disregard them. It just means we can't verify them. The other challenge is that the FBI has a heavy incentive to discredit anything with Donald Trump in it, just because he's in the White House right now, obviously. And so I want to be clear, there are notes related to some of these submissions where they say things like complainant was spoken to and deemed not credible. Additional research showed 3 separate redacted. You know, it's hard to tell how much this is the proper due diligence of the FBI, which they should be doing, of course, and not all complaints are credible. But also there's this obvious conflict of interest with the fact that the sitting president is in some of these complaints. But here they are for what it's worth. Complaint summary. Blank reported an unidentified female friend who was forced to perform on President Trump approximately 35 years ago in New Jersey. The friend told Alexis that she was approximately 13 to 14 years old when this occurred, and the friend allegedly bit President Trump while performing. The friend was allegedly hit in the face after she laughed about biting President Trump. The friend also said she was abused by Epstein. Later, there's very explosive claims about big parties with her, other younger girls, and older Victoria's Secret models, including Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. There's claims third hand about a female victim of Epstein's who wants to publish a book citing Leslie Wexner, Epstein, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Ghislaine Maxwell is in the videos as well. And it goes on
That sounds like Geoffrey. Virginia.
like this for a while. Some of the complaints are just like very graphic, and obviously I'm going to censor out some of it. But I should also mention the DOJ claims that some of these claims were submitted to the FBI right before the 2020 election. To be clear, the claims are unfounded and false, and if they had any shred of credibility, they would have certainly been weaponized against President Trump.
That's
already.
the thing
now,
he
I agree
says,
that if
of
a complaint
course.
is timed right before an election, there definitely could be some other motivations to that. But it's also ridiculous to say that anything in the Epstein files, if it were true, would have come out already. Because why didn't we see the stuff about Bill Gates, for example? And that stuff apparently has been sitting in here for a long time. And not only did no one talk about it, the FBI literally covered for it. I mean, they said that this was not the case. There are big claims against a lot of powerful people. Nobody in that file really wants to rock the boat or release the files because then they get in trouble and their buddies get in trouble. And that's a huge problem. So I don't really buy the
All of
idea
them.
that, oh, if it were true, it would have already gotten out.
Get them
I don't buy
all.
that. That's why we need transparency. That's why it's important these files are out. But this is just to look at a small fraction of the files. And over the next few weeks, we're going to go through all of the major findings we can from this 3.5 million page document dump.
The one thing that I really hate about the release of these files is the double-edged sword that comes along with it. Because then the very people who actually need to be acting on this, who are somewhat going to try to politicize it, the many cronies who still have Trump schlong deep down their throat, are currently going like, oh, we saw the mayor of New York, Zoran Mamdani's mom being involved with Ghislaine Maxwell, who, by the way, has done a lot of generous donations through sea work and other ventures.
There are about 15% only of boats that are tracked, for instance, in the high seas. And just, I would like you to think about this for a second. I'd like to know how many of you would like to fly on a plane if only 15% of planes were talking to air traffic control? Anyone? Or again, perhaps if...
So like being in association in any shape or form is going to be used as something that is meant to discredit someone, despite there being no proof whatsoever. And that is the thing about this. If you cannot verify something, there are going to just be inferences. And inferences can pretty much suck because they sometimes turn into memes. And memes are also a double-edged sword because some are currently creating AI-generated stuff about Epstein and Diddy, right? You likely have seen some of them floating around the internet as of late. But they can also be used as a way to fool the collective consciousness, to make it less important, to literally play into the game that the administration currently wants people to play into of this is not super important. You don't have to worry about this at all. And for stuff like that, obviously, fuck that noise.
And now for something completely different.
Now, before we get into the next part of Coffezilla breaking down the Epstein files, you're going to have to excuse me. Because as a person who likes to cover this kind of things to let you be in the know, FNAF porn.
Gregory's just a child, Vanessa.
I'm just a kid.
I mean, I'm all for killing children, but I'm not an advocate for pedophilia.
Security alert! Security alert!
I really didn't know any other way for me to present this, but this is something that Jeffrey Epstein apparently enjoyed quite a bit to the point of perpetuating it in 4chan threads and sending it to his girlfriend at the time, calling it amazing art.
The animatronic characters here do get a bit quirky at night.
Gooners, listen, I know that the years have not been good and charitable towards you. You lost Lakari recently, but having Jeffrey Epstein join your fold is not something that I expected anybody to have on their bingo card. And speaking of things that I didn't expect to see on the bingo card either, Jeffrey Epstein got banned off of Xbox Live. I don't even know what is going on anymore. There's a message here. Back in 2013, this message is to notify you that Xbox Live has permanently suspended the Xbox Live account associated with this email address. This action is based on the New York Attorney General's partnership with Microsoft and other online gaming companies to remove New York's registered sex offenders from online gaming services to minimize the risks to others, particularly children. 1. Xbox Live did more than Roblox. 2. My non-existing god. Jeffrey Epstein was likely out there not telling people that he fucked their mama, but was planning on them. And does it get any worse than this? Of course it does. Like, you know that he had connections to the actual devil, right? The gaming devil, that is Bobby Kotick. He was on his little black book. Could it possibly be that Bobby Kotick's creation of microtransaction and the hard push of Activision to have them was a thing that was suggested by Jeffrey Epstein? Oh, I don't know. Perhaps that's why the currency was called CP. I can neither confirm nor deny any of these claims. But when an exchange between him and Bobby Kotick goes something like, X price is a good idea, but key is real world reward. Learn to read. Earn cell phone minutes, which by the way, they're illiterate, iPhone credits, virtual items in games. I'm all for indoctrinating kids into an economy. You gotta love how his example for real world rewards is virtual item in games. Pablo's. The cycle of exploitation was in every fiber of their beings. They lived and breathed abuse and exploitation. That's the key takeaway from this. And now to Coffezilla.
It only gets worse from here. We're going back into the 3 million documents. So far, we mostly covered how billionaires lied about their relationship with Epstein and or got blackmailed in the drafts, eventually killing their marriage. We talked about Howard Lutnick, how he lied about meeting Epstein, although he still denies this. And we also talked about some horrible accusations against Trump and Bill Clinton, although we were clear that they are unverified. Now, some people have responded to the release, like Elon Musk, saying that no one fought harder for the full release of the Epstein Files than I did. Ironically, he claims that he knew that the playbook of the far-left propagandists and legacy media is admit nothing, deny everything, and making counter accusations.
Yeah, only the far left. Definitely only the far left. Because the far right and the literal president sees his name into it and goes like, this has nothing to do with me.
On the Epstein Files, you talked about Democrats who were in there. Elon Musk was also in there, and so was your Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and correspondence that he had with him. Did you read those new files that were published to the Department of Justice?
I didn't. I have a lot of things I'm doing, a lot of things I'm doing. I don't know. You mentioned 2 names. I'm sure they're fine.
Move on, forget about it. The American people needs better. I like how every single time this man talks about America, he actually talks about himself.
I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else, really. Now that nothing came out about me, other than it was a conspiracy against me, literally, by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get onto something else.
And under normal circumstances, it would be nice to have a president putting like himself in the place of the country and treating the country as if it was himself. But no, if the country is a reflection of Donald Trump, that's not where you want to be.
Saying he had never set foot on Epstein's creepy island or attended parties, despite the fact we saw last time that Elon was asking to be invited to the party. What day night would be the wildest party on your island? Nevertheless, I think it's an interesting point. The playbook, as we get into this much darker side of the 3.5 million files, you're gonna notice this trend is true, that everyone we're gonna talk about, basically they admit nothing, they deny everything, and then they usually make counter accusations against other people in the files. Almost no one has faced any kind of consequences for this whole thing, leading me to wonder, why is it that it seems like really only in the rest of the world has anyone faced anything? I mean,
yeah, the UK, we got Prince Andrews, we got some politicians that are also stepping down because of this. Slovakia's PM. We got in Norway a princess who also kind of have to apologize. If you had a connection to him somewhere around the world, you were suffering some repercussions. But in the United States...
What? No.
You've got the former Prince Andrew losing his title. You've got the Slovakia National Security Advisor resigning over the Epstein links. But in America, I'm really hard-pressed to think of anyone who has actually faced any kind of accountability. I think Larry Summers stepped back voluntarily. But other than that, it's hard to think of anyone who's faced any kind of justice. In fact, arguably, Ghislaine Maxwell's life is better than it was previously since these Epstein files have dropped. And what's crazy about this is that we know that the government story is false. Remember, the FBI documents showed they had 10 co-conspirators they were investigating. We also got an old draft of an indictment where they had several co-defendants with Epstein. Now, of course, we know these were never ultimately charged. This was back in 2005, but just imagine all the way back in 2005, where these charges are from, we already had evidence that Epstein was not working alone, and of course he's not. But now we're gonna talk a little bit about how the scheme operated. Now, to be clear, we're gonna talk in a second about the laundering of Epstein's reputation, the people who protected him this whole time. But right now, I wanna talk about how Epstein got some of these girls in the first place, because the Epstein files provide an interesting look behind the curtains. Obviously, we know Ghislaine Maxwell was helping, whether it be procure the girls, talk them into stuff. But now we have emails of a different side of the scheme.
Oh, God, we already have Jean-Luc Brunel. Jean-Luc Brunel was such a good friend with Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein, to the point where there is a literal image of her massaging his feet with... They're weird people. And Brunel was, of course, known as Le Fantôme in France because of his amazing ability to avoid both jurisdiction, the police, you name it. He never got caught until he got caught and was, very much like Epstein, died of hanging in a jail cell. But he was a renowned sex offender, a pedophile who was soliciting it and trafficking young girls all the way down to 12-year-olds, giving them the promises of success because he was working within the modeling agencies. He had those connections.
Spoke to Daniel Syed, who Jean-Luc Brunel describes as a scout or recruiter of girls or women for Jeffrey Epstein. Attached to this incoming email from Brunel is the contact information he has for Syed. And then they blacked out his number and email. But digging into Jeffrey's emails with Daniel shows that he was constantly sending him links to girls. It shows Jeffrey Epstein paying Daniel 3,000 euros, which, to be clear, was the amount that was agreed to by Jean-Luc Brunel. Quote,
human trafficking.
Quote, Dominique, we will pay him 3,000 euros each month for scouting for a 6-month period. On all models we will get him, we will pay him 5% commission on their earnings. Imagine it's like baseball or it's like basketball. You're scouting for, I hate to use the word talent, but that's really what this guy was doing. He was going around the globe trying to find people for Jeffrey Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel. According to one lawsuit, Epstein trafficked a Jane Doe to Jean-Luc Brunel many times. It describes their operation as this: many of the girls came from poor countries or impoverished backgrounds. He lured them in with a promise of making good money.
Well, that was on the Brunel side of things, right? Because in the United States, you had all of those girls who were, because of alcohol consumption, because of drug usage, coming from households that had no means of doing better, were told that it was their fault for being in those situations. And the government let them down. And I cannot emphasize this enough. In 2005, when the first claims of Epstein's behavior came to the forefront, when young girls started accusing him, you had prosecutors like Bela Lavik, who was in charge of his case, painting them as just miscreants. It was a statement of them holding beers in their hand and smoking pots, thus insinuating that it was their fault. An argument which, by the way, works against the many podcasters that are now being compromised and are playing for the government, and even news anchors who are trying to paint these people as not having been children when this entire thing took place.
Well, I don't think that the majority or anything close to it of the women were technically, I think it was largely very young, barely legal, so to speak. But and I know that there were cases of underage, but I think
most of it was just
very, very young, but not not like
20-year-old
not
girls,
like 13
18-year-old
type,
girls,
type thing.
Like 20-year-old
not
girls,
like 13.
15-year-old girls. And I realize this is disgusting. I'm definitely not trying to make an excuse for this. I'm just giving you facts. That he wasn't into like 8-year-olds, but he liked the very young teen types that could pass for even younger than they were, but would look legal to a passerby.
Investigators and journalists, like in the farmer case, who was supposed to be testifying, got her story told to Ghislaine Maxwell and ended up making it worse for her and her sister.
For all that, I was already in hiding because of Vanity Fair. Vicky Ward is, I'm going to tell you right now, she's a monster. She's a true monster. She's not a hero. We had to send a cease and desist letter because she's harassed my family for so long to try to save her face, because she told Ghislaine Maxwell over drinks that I reported them to the FBI. Can you believe that?
Holy shit.
And so this was in 2002.
But wow.
In 2000, no, please, I cursed my head off. She, for a year, promised us our safety. For a whole year. And see, I didn't meet with Graydon. I met with Vicky. And so Vicky's the one that's responsible here, because she was the person who promised us our safety, and she promised us that she would protect the story, right? Since then, she calls and threatens, I own your story. I can write your story if I mean, she's a real piece of work.
To the point where she had to step forth and ask Vanity Fair, like, what the fuck happened? All the while you had individual later on in time, during the, let's say, Me Too era, when a lot of people started coming forth and speaking out about this, you had, like, the aforementioned idiot there, Lawrence Krauss, the Harvey Weinstein, you named them, even the proponent of rationality, like the Richard Dawkins, who were screaming to the top of their lungs about cancel culture and how it was that the Me Too movement was attacking men, fueling this culture war to protect the degeneracy. That's the thing that fucking annoys me. And then you, of course, had shods who were just goggling all of these things for so many years, finding every single place, which is not to say that there weren't cases where there were legitimate women that had lied. Because just like I said, in even some of the Epstein cases, women let other women down.
I'd like to know how many of you would like to fly on a plane.
But like, part of me really just hoped that when people were witnessing the pop culture meltdown that sometimes occurs when culture war talking points are being spread, and observe that the very same people who are pushing these points are the folks who are defending nonsense like this and or are themselves PDF files, I just hope that people come to some kind of rationale.
Well, Brunel has been a model scout for various modeling agencies for many years, and he was apparently able to get U.S. passports for young girls to work as models, eventually, of course, being sent to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, it should be noted that Jean-Luc Brunel himself died in prison by hanging, and that's while he was being accused of horrible crimes related to trafficking and minors. So this guy is not a good guy. He was part of the op, along with Daniel Syed, who was also scouting on behalf of Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel. They had their agreement. Here's a sample of how this would work. Jeffrey Epstein asked him to take a full body shot of someone. The problem this time is not only are a lot of people still being protected, like literally the names of the people they were going to charge, you couldn't argue those are victims, but the work was just done so sloppy that oftentimes you'll find that the DOJ has uploaded 2 documents that are functionally identical, and they redacted one but not the other, letting you see what's ultimately behind the mask, which is dumb because sometimes the thing they're redacting is Jeffrey Epstein's name. Or other times it's somebody who clearly is not a victim, because then you see the non-redacted copy and you're like, yeah, that's clearly not.
Yeah, it makes it hard to know what is true.
So it's a little strange what they seem to have done here. Let me give you a for instance. So we have this message from somebody whose name is blacked out, and we see participants, and then we see Jeffrey Epstein is involved, right? And it says, we need to work around your 38. We need to push back on the lies, then crush the pedo trafficking narrative, then...
Yeah. This is Steve Bannon. It's crazy that I read enough about this man to know that this is exactly how he writes. This man is vile. This is the guy who wants to abolish the Constitution, so to make sure that Donald Trump gets a third term.
Well, he's going to get a third term. So Trump 28, Trump is going to be president in 28, and people just ought to get accommodated with that.
So what about the 22nd Amendment?
There's many different alternatives. At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is, but there's a plan, and President Trump will be the president in 28.
You serious?
If there's one thing that can be appreciated about him, he's very forward. He doesn't mince his words.
Rebuild your image as a philanthropist. Now, I want to know who's doing that. Who's trying to rebuild Jeffrey Epstein's image, right? Well, we go ahead, we scroll down, and we see that Jeffrey Epstein sends something. He says, in any bar where drinking age is 18, and you see the participant is once again blacked out. But underneath it, in a separate file, we see Steve Bannon, a famous political figure, is in here, and he's saying the same thing. He says, first, we need to push back on the lies, then crush the trafficking narrative, then rebuild your image as a philanthropist. Guys, why did you censor out his name? Or, like, why was that censored at all? I don't understand. And I certainly...
Because it was easier to search that. They literally did a Control F Steve Bannon, yet at the same time, they blacked out Epstein's name, right? It's fucking weird.
I don't understand why Jeffrey Epstein's name in this one is censored. So Jeffrey's not censored in this one, but Bannon is, and then Bannon's not censored in this one, and Epstein is. And sometimes this creates the bizarre impression that they are censoring for victim names or for some like kind of victim status or for some reason. And then you see the other file and you're like, wait, why did you do this? It's just very poorly done throughout. That's just something I wanted to comment on, is not only did they once again not fully redact things because they were sloppy, but also like victims' names got stuck in this. Like girls' names appear sometimes, and like I'm not sure, are they supposed to be redacted? Because they're redacted over here, they're not over here. I can kind of figure out who it is. It's just kind of a mess. I needed to point that out. You know, other times we have things like this, like Brock Pierce, a co-founder of Tether, also known as the biggest stablecoin in the world. He sent a message to Jeffrey Epstein with the subject line Anastasia, and then it's just a bunch of redacted stuff with a few untitled JPEGs in here. And so, you know, you're thinking to yourself, what is this? Is
Why
he sending some
of the
illicit
JPEGs?
media? Like, what is this? Well, then we have this page where it wasn't redacted. I put that little dark square that I didn't know if this should have been redacted or not. But it's like a bunch of JPEGs. Now, does that contain victims? Is Brock Pierce sending photos of victims? I don't know because of the way the government did this. But underneath, it says, the Ukraine is now my favorite country, smiley face, Brock Pierce, with the subject line Anastasia. I don't know what to make of that. I'm just saying the redactions, like the way they did this is not good. But now let's return to Steve Bannon and his we're gonna crush the trafficking narrative.
I want you to remember that the likes of Todd Blanche, working straight under Trump, is going to be like, it's not a crime to party with Epstein. Like, seriously, I just want anybody who's been involved in this to be taken away. Like, the fact that there are some out here who are playing this weird game of I'm gonna blame others. No! Like freaking Nicki Minaj that did the right-wing pivot and went straight to MAGA and started glazing Donald Trump because, obviously, her brother and husband are sexual offenders, so if you get to MAGA, they are going to protect you. That's just the pattern, okay? I think that Jeffrey Epstein, the bad thing that ever happened to him was that he died before Donald Trump got elected again. But back to Nicki. Nicki Minaj comes forth and goes like, hey, I've seen that not P. Diddy, but Jay-Z as well as Pusha T are in the Epstein Files, so let me harp on that. Well, guess what, bitch? Get along with them. You can all three be thrown in jail, thinking that doing that is going to buy her sympathy.
Because this guy, oh boy, has been revealed in the files to being like Jeffrey's right-hand PR man. I mean, this guy was filming basically a documentary about Jeffrey Epstein in order to rehabilitate his image. And some of it has actually leaked to the public. It's been interesting to watch how that's been received. But the funny thing is that originally Jeffrey Epstein's plan was to just do a YouTube video, like an apology, like a old school 2016, turn on the camera for authenticity and saying, you know, he says, Do you think I can do my own video interview and upload it to YouTube? No sandbagging, interview format, or like a diary piece. Steve Bannon says if you do an interview, it can't be like Johnny does a YouTube. It has to be amazingly professional and perfectly cut. Then Jeffrey Epstein responds, Woody, we assume Woody Allen, because they were close, said he would help edit. Not sure how to stage, what points to make, but better than trying to do an interview that I have no experience doing. Goal is to humanize the monster. Anything written carries little weight, to which Steve Bannon replies, yes, Jeffrey Epstein. Should it be an interview format, interviewed by me? They start talking about, like, how do we do this? Humor, apology, how did I get rich? Question mark, topics. They're brainstorming. How do we trick the public into seeing me as more than a monster? Now, funny enough, right before this, Jeffrey Epstein asks about a dinner with Woody, and then he says, or too many p***s in one place.
Oh man. At least he recognized his own nature. At least he wasn't so delulu to think himself as some kind of benevolent philanthropist as some of these psychos tend to be out of the rocker.
And you gotta love the self-awareness there. Now, I don't know what he meant by that. To be clear, I'm not making that accusation against Woody Allen. We'll talk about him in a second. That's Jeffrey Epstein saying that. I think what's interesting to point out, though, is how all these rich and powerful people are circling the wagons to try to protect Jeffrey Epstein's reputation, right? Mm-hmm. This is a guy who at this point has been known for years to have pled guilty to these 2008 charges. This was an open secret. And so Steve Bannon goes along though anyways, and he films this documentary. Now what's interesting is he starts talking about the documentary and he starts saying, I'm watching our second hour now. Guys were blown away. I didn't think it was as strong at the time, but I was wrong. Need huge part about threat of AI versus reality, threat of climate change. And this is where the notes start.
Oh, I imagine because of his wife's fond to like the protection of sea creatures. Because, you know, villains always need to have some quirk that kind of humanizes them in a weird way, like she's protecting the sea. Like they could use that as an angle to justify that, hey, he actually meant well.
Start going back and forth of how can we get you to think of other things? So part of the conceit of this big interview of Jeffrey Epstein was to try to humanize him and actually present him as this genius, everyman, quirky guy with a few flaws, right? They knew they couldn't run away from the crimes. To quote, in Bannon's words, yes, 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 of course, but we must counter rapists who traffics in female children to be by world's most powerful, richest men. That can't be redeemed. Can't redeem the unredeemable. You are a lot of things which we will show, but you are not that. Bannon is aware that like they can't fully embrace the Epstein thing. They have to kind of make it about more than that. And if you see the YouTube clip going around, that's what that is. And it's been so interesting to watch the reaction because you see, even for people who've been prepped with the idea that this is basically propaganda, some of them still fall for it. They post things like, you know, oh, bro is casually confirming the world's conspiracies because he's talking about 2008. But guys, that's the whole deception. They're
the death of media literacy. You can't be told one thing, and that's why I said in the previous video that I made about Alex Preddy. Thanks to the Orange Man, we live in a post-truth reality. It doesn't matter what people are told, they just go by what they want to believe. As long as they confirm their biases, they don't give a shit. And that is infinitely infuriating.
They're like trying to be like, hey, this guy, this horrible monster, he's going to tell you the secrets of the inside club. So you think more, that's the whole thing. That's how they're getting away with this. It's not some kind of, oh, he happened to want to talk about this. This is all premeditated. This has gone through revisions. They even called Jeffrey Epstein the smartest guy in the room.
Look, you're the smartest guy in the room, right? You know that.
It's honestly ridiculous anyone believes the false conceit of, you're obviously the smartest man in the room. You could tell us the world's secrets. I mean, this guy, honestly, he talks about some of his engagements, like with the Rockefeller board, and he tries to say that owning a calculator is why he got that.
It was very advanced in those days to have a Texas Instrument calculator, where it could, by putting in the numbers, it would multiply for you to do square roots. And that was the first, and everyone who had a calculator was already advanced on Wall Street. The most important parts of business were really now going to calculations. places like Rockefeller needed someone to say, look, we're entering a different world where numbers and the numbers of companies, portfolio management was going to be balanced. It was going to be statistical. Jeffrey, could you come on the board?
And as I explained before, this wasn't how he made his money. He slept around, had connections, and blackmailed people. That's what made him rise through the ranks. Not because he was some math genius. He didn't get any degrees, and well, I'm not going to insist here that you need to have a degree to be good at something that you do. Else people can acquire academic expertise by watching YouTube videos. Epstein was not that guy.
Potentially sit on the finance committee.
So we're honestly supposed to believe that Jeffrey Epstein got onto this prestigious Rockefeller board because he had a calculator, but also that he's the smartest guy in the room, the smartest man on Wall Street. And let's not talk about those horrific crimes he committed because, you know, he's not really such a bad guy after all. But it wasn't just Steve Bannon that was trying to humanize or giving advice on how to humanize Epstein. It was also Richard Branson, the famous billionaire. He was caught emailing Jeffrey Epstein saying, "Dear Jeffrey, it was really nice seeing you yesterday. The boys in water sports can't stop speaking about it. Anytime you are in the area, would love to see you as long as you bring your harem."
Richard Branson's also always surrounded by women. I don't like the guy, but he did one thing during the when we all talked about the submarine that collapsed. The billionaire submarine that collapsed. But after signing a contract with Spencer Composites in 2017, Spencer's, who by the way, had built the composite pressure hull for the Deep Flight Challenger, that submersible that is now owned by Richard Branson. Yes, that other space commercial guy. That was designed to dive only once, which is also one of the reasons why I ever bought a GoPro. That video was kind of awesome. Branson had owned the early models that were being produced by that company. So when they mentioned water sports, that was the first thing that came to mind.
I don't know, that's not that ambiguous, guys. I think we can imagine what that means. But anyways, he says,
Ocean Gate.
I think if Bill Gates was willing to say that you've been a brilliant advisor to him, that you slipped up many years ago by sleeping with a 17-and-a-half-year-old and were punished for it, that you've more than learned your lesson and have done nothing that's against the law since. And yes, as a single man, you have a penchant for women, but there's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, something along those lines. He's giving him PR advice. How to get your reputation back. Hey, Jeffrey, privately, I loved you. You can come back anytime with your harem. Jeffrey Epstein responds, nice seeing you. Thanks for your hospitality. I appreciate your public relations thoughts. Now, according to the New York Times, a Branson representative said the two had a business meeting and stressed the women were adults and had not attended the meeting. All above board. That's what everyone says, by the way. Remember what Elon Musk said, right? That's the playbook. Admit nothing, deny everything. Speaking of, remember Howard Lutnick, who we showed on video saying that he had never seen Epstein since 2005.
So I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going.
Because he was gross.
Although also calling him the greatest blackmailer ever.
This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever.
Well, also according to the Times, Lutnick said he spent zero time with him, even though there are emails basically to the contrary, where Epstein is saying, nice seeing you after the conviction. I mean, these people, not only are they lying, they won't even admit when they've been caught lying. But now let's talk about Prince Andrew, too, who was caught lying over a woman at some kind of a party. I mean, just not a good...
Prince Andrew, the man who cannot sweat.
And that was, oh, actually, yes. I didn't sweat at the time, and it's only because I have done a number of things in the recent past that I'm starting to be able to do that again. So I'm afraid to say that there's a medical condition that says that I didn't do it, so therefore...
This is not doing you any favors, you know. I know Prince Andrew soon will probably be on the comeback tour. It's going to be a bunch of highly paid PR execs. Maybe Steve Bannon can jump in, shoot another 5-hour podcast trying to rehabilitate him. Like, Prince Andrew, what's the secret behind the royal family?
Look, you're the smartest guy in the room.
But again,
I mean, not just that. Piers Morgan, who loves his royals, is likely going to have him on board and being like, oh, let me suck that royal cock.
Now, we should also probably talk about Noam Chomsky as well, the guy behind the book Manufacturing Consent, which in hindsight, maybe we should have suspected something.
Noam
But either
Chomsky.
way, he also sends some reputational advice to his buddy Jeffrey Epstein. He says, I watched the horrible way you've been treated by the press and public. It's painful to say, but I think the best way to proceed is to ignore it.
That's the thing. Political scientists, people of renown, all of them were involved.
Vultures dearly want is a public response, which then provides a public opening. In general, I think it's best not to react unless directly questioned, particularly in the current mood. That's the best advice I can think of. Noam. Now, he sends that to Matthew Hiltzik of Hiltzik Strategies, who is a also famous PR guy, I guess, trying to help Epstein, I assume, who responds, I think that is wise. Now, later talking with Bannon, Epstein loops in Hiltzik again. He says, Matt Hiltzik thought your idea was epic. Hypocrisy of the liberal left. And he says, yep, he would confidentially like to sit and help if you like. This is Matthew Hiltzik. You know, a lot of powerful people basically were bending over backwards, left, right, center, trying to rehabilitate this guy's image. And the question is, why? Why were all these guys so interested in their precious Jeffrey Epstein?
And this is why I always tell you this. Despite how some may be kind of annoyed, who obviously see that there's one side that is clearly more gross than the other. They are two sides of the same coins. Democrats, Republicans. There are some amongst their parties that try to do some good, but every single member who are never willing to recognize the structural problems that are within their parties and just keep on licking out the boots of the people who are willing to sponsor ICE, who are protecting the pedophiles, who are bending over backwards with misogyny, just like J.D. Vance, who currently is going to his misogyny Olympic with Megyn Kelly at the moment.
Like, why does it always have to be so antagonistic? Relationship with Caitlin Collins, which is unusual given that she's from CNN. But the president, she's asking a question. The president says, why don't you ever smile?
Yeah.
And it's actually like so perceptive, even if you're asking a tough question, even if you take your job very seriously. Like, why does it always have to be so antagonistic?
Well, I laugh because I saw online everybody was calling him sexist for saying that. And I literally said the same thing about Caitlin Collins a year ago on my show. She never smiles. Every once in a while, you have to smile. Roger Ailes used to tell us that. Every once in a while, you get remember to smile, show the viewers that you have a heart.
Have some fun.
Now, you might be wondering why I mentioned J.D. Vance and Megyn Kelly and why I'm showing you this clip. Well, as a person who tends to expose himself to news from both sides, so to be able to call hypocrisy when I see it, Roger Ailes, who Megyn Kelly has just brought up in this clip, is a person who has sexually harassed her before, which is a weird thing to bring forth when accusation of misogyny is brought up against a person who is defending a sexual harasser, and especially as you mentioned him as a person whose example should be followed.
So the harassment that I went through wasn't obviously harassment in the beginning, and then it graduated. You know, it just got worse and worse and worse to the point where you couldn't deny it. And it was explicit quid pro quo sexual harassment, which was, you know, basically you sleep with me and I'll give you a promotion. And even in those moments, I tried to laugh it off and pretend I wasn't hearing what I was hearing, or try to pretend that I had misunderstood, because I didn't want a direct confrontation with him. You know, I didn't want to have to reject him explicitly, and I think this is telling. And truly, the culmination of it was in his office because you'd go in there and he'd shut the door and he'd lock the door.
It's terrifying.
And you would sort of shrug it off because he was known to be very paranoid about security. But that feeling I'll never forget of like going in there and having him lock that door. And then, so it culminated in him trying to be with me physically. And it was only at that point where you couldn't pretend it wasn't happening anymore, that I really had to come to terms with it. And I ran out of the guy's office. I mean, he tried to grab me 3 times, make out with me, which he didn't. But I had to shove him off of me, and he came back, and I shoved him again, and he came back a 3rd time. And then when I shoved him off the 3rd time, he asked me when my contract was up.
Oh my God.
So there you go.
So how do you...
As long as those people are not willing to recognize it, they are all the same. Which is why I always say, vote for policies.
If they had no involvement, I mean, that's the part I can't figure out it, because all of them deny it, all of them don't admit anything. And so what exactly is the problem? But now it's time to talk about Elon Musk's brother, Kimbal Musk. He was also in the files. Jeffrey was copied on an email talking...
The one who daddy loves more.
About Kimbal's 40th birthday, where the password to the secret party was P riot. And then in all caps, Boris, the sender of this email, says, I am not joking about the password. This was in 2012 in September. Now that's important because a little bit later, Kimbal Musk is emailing Boris Nikolic and Jeffrey Epstein, and he's talking to them about being connected with some redacted name and saying, I believe you both played a role, whatever that means. Now, whether this was at the party or, right after their meeting in October, I don't know. But what's interesting is Boris responds and says, Kimbal, just FYI, you better be nice to redacted. Jeffrey goes crazy when someone mistreats his girls/friends, so better be very nice to her. Kimbal Musk responds, message received, wide and clear. Then he says, seriously, I'm very happy with my time so far with Jennifer. She's great. Now, again, was that supposed to be a redacted name we just read? Like, I don't know. They've been redacting it in earlier emails. Then all of a sudden you just get Jennifer. I can't really figure that out. But what I can figure out is that a little while later, a few days later, Jeffrey Epstein gets an email. Now we know Kimbal credits the meetup and says Boris and Epstein were responsible in some way for this. But now Jeffrey Epstein's being emailed about Jen's schedule. Is that Jennifer? I mean, it seems like it because Jen's schedule for the rest of the year, and it seems like the assistant has copy and pasted Jen's response because she says, Sue, these would be dates in November, and then starts saying, this, she can go to New York. She says the 29th to the 7th, she's free. Kimbal to New York. Then she says, Kimbal, Jen, London. Kimbal, Jen, London to Morocco, ? Then she has a break, and then it's Jen, Kimbal, St. Bart's, assuming we're not sick of each other by the end of November. Now, I can't figure out why is she running this schedule about when she's hanging out with Kimbal, who Jeffrey set her up with. Like, why is she running this by Elon Musk? To be clear, I don't know. There could be, I guess, innocent explanations for this. Maybe, I don't know. But all I see are constant, powerful people either being introed to girls, talking about the harem, talking about beautiful ladies, and the FBI, they can't figure it out. They have no evidence to even investigate third parties. Why? I guess because they're rich and powerful. Around the world, we're seeing resignations, we're seeing people lose their status. But here in the United States, we've got multiple presidents in the files. We've got the world's richest man in the files, several of the world's richest men in the files, and we just can't drum up any kind of evidence. It's just incredible to me. Now, I also want to talk about another rich and powerful person, and that is Peter Attia.
Oh my God, of course. Of course, the healthcare guru bullshit there. Of course he would have had a relationship with Epstein. This is something that was speculated about for some time now. Oh, I didn't even get this in my radar. But it makes sense. He's one of those who is likely in a limbo situation right now. You are not cool enough to be part of the inner circle, but you are now stuck with Jeffrey Epstein as a stinking odor that is just gravitating around you and you can't escape it.
He's a podcast bro. He's a longevity expert. And actually, funny enough, I read his book. And that's going to come into play here in a second because, oh boy, did I get some additional context. But let's start here with something that Peter Attia sent Jeffrey Epstein. He says, subject, got a fresh shipment. And then Epstein responds, me too, and there's a completely redacted image. Is that a girl? Is this bad redactions? We don't know, although we'll find out in a second because later Peter responded to this. But Peter says, please tell me you found that picture online. Jeffrey responds, got a fresh shipment, afraid not. Peter responds, the biggest problem with becoming friends with you. The life you lead is so outrageous, yet I can't tell a soul. Why, Peter? Why can't you tell a soul? Why don't you tell us now? Now that it's all out in the open, why don't you tell us why you can't tell a soul the secrets or the life that Epstein leads? And then we get another redacted photo, right? And then some more images, and Peter says, please tell me that's not where you actually are. And Jeffrey says, you can see the gym in the middle, just me and 4. And Peter says, I think you might have a more interesting life than the Dos Equis guy. Is this off the coast of France? No, it's my island in the Caribbean near St. Thomas. If you go to Google Earth and type in Little St. James. Beautiful. Isn't that nice? Behind closed doors, it's beautiful In public, we'll hear about what a
Yikes.
monster this guy is, right? But behind closed doors, when nobody's watching, oh, it's beautiful. There's some other stuff Peter Attia said, which I'm not going to get into. I don't think it's very, appropriate for medical professionals.
What the fuck?
To be saying such things, but, this wasn't all business, right? This wasn't just doctor-patient kind of stuff. There's a lot of... There's a lot of guy talk, a lot of banter between the fellas about ladies. And maybe that's why Peter Attia says that hopefully Jeffrey Epstein is in town when I'm back in 2 weeks. I go into Jeffrey Epstein withdrawal when I don't see him. So guys, these two were close. I mean, apparently so close that, Peter Attia goes into withdrawal when he doesn't see him. Peter Attia says, are you on island? Jeffrey Epstein says, P Beach, probably Palm Beach.
Yeah.
And he says, what do you do when you get there? Jeffrey Epstein, guess. Peter Attia, besides that,
Beside
they're
what?
not even trying to hide it, guys. This is barely code at this point. What do you do? Guess. Well, besides that, Jeffrey, we know what you do, right? So it's so funny that the FBI's like, we don't know. We can't tell what's out there. We have no
clue.
Right? No.
And that's the worst part, their idiocy, as well as just the evil is coming through with that, because they are the ones who can check all the funds, they can check all of the transactions, all of the money, they can trace it all, but they refuse to.
Evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. And
They can ask you to pay your fucking taxes at the end of the day by collaborating with different governmental agencies, but no, finding the most famous pedophile around the globe, no, we can't do that.
And proceed to dump on us a ton of evidence, at least to investigate, right? I'm not saying these people are guilty. Obviously, all of them deny, don't admit, blame other people, say other people are responsible for everything. So that is taken as a given. I am not accusing anyone here. I'm just saying, seems like we got a few leads here, fellas. Some people to look at. Now, I want to address the fact that Peter Attia has actually responded to this whole debacle. He says the following email is what I sent my team last night. I sent a similar version to my patients as well. You put your trust, your credibility, your hard work, what we built together, and I take that responsibility seriously. You deserve a complete and honest account of what did and did not happen. I apologize it did not get this out sooner. I wanted to be thorough. He says, I was not involved in any criminal activity. My interactions had nothing to do with his abuse or exploitation of anyone. I was never on his plane, never on his island, never present at any parties. That said, I apologize and regret putting myself in a position where emails, some of them embarrassing, tasteless, and indefensible, are now public. So it's this apology. He addresses some of the things, and he says that some of it's just banter, right? Like I said, it's just guy talk, whatever that means. He claims that his got a fresh shipment was in reference to a photograph of bottles of metformin, and then Jeffrey responded with a photograph of an adult woman. I responded with crude, tasteless banter. He says one line in that exchange about his life being outrageous and me not being able to tell anyone is being interpreted as awareness of wrongdoing. That's not how I meant it at all. What I was referring to poorly and flippantly was the discretion commanded by those socials and professional circles. The idea you don't talk about who you meet. I don't know, Peter. This seems like revisionist history. A little bit. I mean, personally, to me, as I'm viewing this, third hand, right? Just from the outsider perspective. Now, Peter says he did ask Jeffrey about his 2008 conviction, because all this happened afterwards, right? He characterized it as prostitution-related charges. In 2018, I learned that this was grossly minimized. I was incredibly naive to believe him, and then later explains that in 2018, November, he read the Miami Herald investigative article, told him he needed to accept responsibility for what he did, and said he even asked Epstein to provide therapy to Epstein's victims, which is an interesting approach to have here. Now, the funny thing is, there are some more emails between Peter Attia that we need to read, because remember that he said he read this 2018 article from the Miami Herald. I believe it's this one by Julia K. Brown in November 28th. It's about Jeffrey Epstein assembling a large cult-like network of underage girls. But in December, Peter Attia says, home is very good, work stressful, making some changes. He asks him, what's the fallout from the recent story? Apparently talking about the Miami Herald. Now, maybe I just didn't see the emails, that where he was demanding accountability. I don't know what that's about, but Jeffrey Epstein says, same as usual, just tougher. Peter Attia says, legally, any change. Jeffrey Epstein, 0. So, I don't know. Maybe this whole, you gotta provide therapy to, these victims happened. I haven't seen it yet. I definitely could see it. But it's just kind of shocking. I just kind of don't buy it. Like the whole, Is there any change legally? That more sounds like you're covering yourself. I mean, just to be honest. But maybe I could look past all of that if not for the thing we're about to see, which just in my mind is maybe the worst thing I've seen in the files. Not for its, explicitness, the amount of simping that people did for Jeffrey Epstein. Now they all say, oh, it was a personal mistake, blah, blah, blah. I regret it. I didn't look into it enough. But the level is just, you've never seen anything like it. So remember I said I read a book by Peter Attia. It was called Outlive, and he's supposed to be this doctor who knows a lot about longevity. So he writes it, and I picked it up because at the rate we're getting rid of these crimes, I need to live forever in order to try to stop some of these scams. But as I pick up this book, and one of the things in the book is Peter Attia kind of reflecting internally about how he's kind of been a bit, and I'm paraphrasing here, but a bit of a psycho in his life, and he needed to focus on family stuff. And so he kind of, it's almost a confessional of some embarrassing things in his life. And honestly, it comes off as very vulnerable, very self-reflective. He's this doctor telling other people what to do, but he's not a very good patient. That's kind of how it comes off. And one of the stories is awful. I won't go too much into it, but basically his son has this horrible medical emergency. It's described in this book like this. A few months ago, Tuesday, July 11th, 2017, that date is important. At 5:45 to be exact, I received a call from Jill, my wife. She was in an ambulance with our infant son. Now, again, I'm not going to get into the details here because, it's tragic, and I'm not trying to bring that into it. What is relevant is that Peter Attia talks about how he stayed in New York and didn't show up because he was, quote, busy with his important work. Even today, just thinking about what happened, I feel nauseous about my behavior. I can't believe I did that to my family. Now, at the time I read that and I was like, well, it's at least as good that you self-reflected on that. It's horrible, but, yeah, you were a bit of a psycho. But what's crazy?
What is the important work?
Now, we find out some of the important work, I mean, it's a little unclear, but some of the important work may have been Jeffrey Epstein, which is just, it's so dark to imagine. Remember, he says July 11th, 2017
2 days later
is when this all happened. And then he says he did not come home to San Diego until Friday the following week, 10 days later. So July 11th, 2017, 2 days after this happens, he's talking to Jeffrey Epstein. And they seem to be coordinating about something. Sure, what time? Jeffrey Epstein, 9:30. Peter Attia responds, sure, I can come earlier. Also, if you have a hard stop at 10, let me know. You're hanging out with Jeffrey? I don't even know what to say. This is out of pocket. I mean, there's no...
This entire thing, these entire files are literally fuck them kids. Whether it is your own, your family, just like Howard Lutnick bringing them to the Epstein Island, Musk, who wanted to leave his children behind because he wanted to party crazy on the Epstein Island, Gates leaving his wife at home because he wanted to go to the Epstein Island, Lawrence Krauss, oh my, what the fuck is wrong with these people? Even the Clintons, right? The Clintons, they have recently admitted is not the right word, but they want to participate in a hearing where they have to confirm the involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. From what I've read, some articles state that Bill wants his own transcriptor and stuff like that, and that beside, of course, that Hillary has no connection to Epstein at all, beside that of her husband, their daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, participated in their daughter's wedding and took her on vacation, even though people knew that he was a sex offender. So, to me, it sounds at best that Hillary is a dumbass, or at worst, that she's a horrible mom. I get it, your daughter might be a grown-up, but if you don't speak up about something like that, and if you know that Epstein is such a monster, why didn't you say something?
But that is just... There's a reason that didn't make it in the book, is what I'm trying to say. I didn't see that in the book when I read it. I didn't see... I was actually... one of the things I needed to do, my important work, was seeing or talking to Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, isn't that weird? That's the simping that I'm talking about, is these people love this guy. Or that's how it seems to me. What are all these rich and powerful people doing, protecting him, missing emergencies for Jeffrey, fawning over Jeffrey, asking for Jeffrey's harem, saying their biggest problem is the life they lead is so outrageous they can't tell us all? I mean, what is going on here? And is it true they all didn't know, right? Because, I'm reading these documents and it's hard to say who exactly knew what, when. But I don't believe, remember, they're all denying it. I don't believe nobody knew, right? Clearly, some people knew what was going on. And there's all this kind of coded language in the files where they talk about this stuff almost in like a nudge kind of way. I mean, here's some Woody Allen stuff. He was in the files. He says his business office, if you can make out the check to me, it looks very bad because then it looks like a gift to me. He says that to Epstein. He says, I don't want to be one of your women, or should I say, girls. And what's that? Oh, how do we, come on, guys. Woody says, I would be much more expensive than your girls. You wouldn't be able to afford me. Jeffrey responds, yes, the price to pay would be too high. Woody says, this will be a beautiful friendship. And then Jeffrey says, as long as I follow orders, smiley face. Woody Allen sends a message saying Woody says the exact same thing, but in a dirtier way. Jeffrey responds, what did he say? Woody Allen, are you kidding? I can't put it in writing. I mean, no evidence? No evidence. How? Come on. I think I see a little bit of evidence. I'm squinting, but I think I can see a little bit of evidence. I mean, guys, like Jeffrey Epstein right here, where he's talking to a guy, he says, Paris with Woody, and the person responds, for le pedophile convention. And Jeffrey says, I think pedophile is the plural. I mean, no evidence. I mean, is that no evidence? That's nothing. We don't even want to question these people. There's no investigations going on. So, yeah, it's honestly really sad to see how, look, I'm not saying people around the world are having crazy consequences, but a few people are resigning, thank goodness. A few people are at least facing a little bit of scrutiny, but here Elon Musk lays out the playbook, apparently for our guys. We admit nothing, we deny everything, and we blame others. We just push the spotlight onto other people. And unfortunately, that's what you've seen the whole time from all the people in the files. All of them say, oh, I was so happy these files came out. It's about shining accountability and justice for the victims, but I had nothing to do with it. Okay, so then where's the justice for the victims? So nobody, all of you say somebody else had something to do with it, but everybody says nobody had anything to do with it. The FBI says they don't have any other, investigations, any other kind of leads, despite the fact we have one of the procurers of the women just walking free, apparently, like no charges against him. Have we investigated him? I mean, it's just shocking how much the Epstein files show the powerful, how they protect their own, how so many of them knew what was going on to the extent they found out later. A lot of them tried to protect Epstein, like literally make PR campaigns for his reputation. And this is a dark look at the state of the world, honestly, because Epstein happened a while ago, but the reason everyone cares is because there's other
it's still
Epsteins
going on
around, right? There's other
who out there? Thank you, Coffezilla, for your coverage. But who out there didn't think to themselves that somebody else was going to take the mantle, right? We literally just uncovered somebody who had been doing this a similar thing for quite some time now, but just got busted. PDD. And despite the administration selling it as, oh, it is something that's dealt with already, it is still ongoing. All right, editing Jack here. Just to conclude the video and to reiterate some of the same points that I was going to say anyway, but with some added context with regards to some of the stuff that I got to show additionally post-recording. Also, I get to say this in a calmer fashion because I got a little bit heated and angry at the end. What I really want to hammer home here is the lack of accountability and this continuous betrayal to the social contract that you and I, with the exception of that 1%, seem to adhere to. Because this massive file dump has dropped. And what happened? This is not me trying to legitimize the nothing ever happens group here, but no government shutdown happened. No strikes to figure out what in the blazes they were going to do about a cult of PDF files, degenerates, and suck-ups to the former who get away with the worst crimes that you can think of. Not even a statement to placate the people so that they can beguile themselves into believing that something will eventually be done. This is why many people say that we, and this also includes us outside of the United States, are not angry enough about this. Because when asked for justice by the victims, this is the type of response that we get.
What did you say? Go ahead,
What would you say to the survivors who feel like they haven't gotten justice?
You are the worst reporter. No wonder CNN has no ratings because of people like you. You know, she's a young woman. I don't think I've ever seen you smile. I've known you for 10 years. I don't think I've ever seen a smile on your face.
I'm asking you about survivors.
You know why? You know why you're not smiling? Because you know you're not telling the truth, and you're a very dishonest organization, and they should be ashamed of you.
These files and the many people involved aren't just stories. They are pretty awful stories, yeah, but not just stories. These files paint a picture of the world where accountability is a twisted luxury only afforded by the poor. Those of us who don't have access to the higher echelons of society. Those of us who can't buy a new New York mansion or sail on a yacht or fly on a private jet. And when the most vulnerable in our society are affected, those whom they will cry over that we need to protect the children, yet they do nothing, you get a little bit angry. And it is a justified anger, but one that needs to be harnessed and channeled in the right direction. Because America has a history of oppression. Oppression of the news, oppression of its people, and especially oppression of the most vulnerable. Well, it has been built on those foundations, a history of maintaining the status quo until the people have had enough and bring upon the change to the system. Now, the system has been like this for quite some time, where the voices of those who have been wronged the most are shouted out but are told to be wrong, whether it has been because of obfuscation, propagandization, whatever myriad of tools that those in power have used to make their fellow American ignore, refute, or even hate each other for pointing out injustice. And you know what? I think that perhaps this one is not one of those cases that should just get to fizzle out and not ignite a spark in people to actually bring about that change. That said, though, it is mostly up to Americans. All I can do is to somewhat keep people informed and, unfortunately, a nature that comes along with it, entertain. But yeah, this has been it for me on the Epstein Files, folks. Hopefully you found this educational, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.